Hello, my name is Jeff Bockelman. I'm an architect on the Solutions and Innovation team at Boomi. And today's session is going to get into modeling and testing data relationships in Master Data Hub. So let's think of the business problem here. If you're an MDM administrator or a data steward, you need to ensure that critical thing data, think of products or components, that this data type is effectively synchronized with your mission critical systems for either operational or analytical scenarios. If this data is not timely or accurate, it could have some severe business consequences. So when thinking about some data quality problems that could arise for this scenario, thing domains such as product, component, or equipment are more normalized than other domains, meaning they're less flat. They're not just like kind of comprised of single records in a system. The core unit of data required for a use case is potentially spread across multiple objects or tables, which introduces this data quality problem where managing the referential integrity, a key data quality dimension, is rather difficult. More and more systems need to be synchronized with that relevant data. So that concept of integrity is increasingly important. You could have master records with subrecords. Think of it as like a parent-child relationship or however you refer to it. They need to be designed and governed thoughtfully to avoid integration errors downstream. So say, for example, you're synchronizing components. It's going to be the basis of today's walkthrough. And these components reference a key parent product. And you're wanting to synchronize changes to components in System A out to System B. But if System A is contributing a component create or an update, then ideally that key parent product should already exist in System B to avoid foreign key kind of referential integrity exception when you're trying to update that data via integrations out to System B. So use a lot of terminology there. Solving these types of problems are easier said than done. And the design of a solution around this can get complex rather quickly if you're balancing a lot of different data relationships. So the solution today that we're going to go through, the goal is to demystify and harness key features in Boomi Master Data Hub to accelerate model relationship configuration and unit testing. So the idea is that I'll walk through the options available when designing these simple models. Please follow along with me. If you want to set it up in your own environment, I've tried to keep the models as simple as possible so it's easy to publish and deploy. And then I'll walk through a test integration, which I'll make available in the Boomi process library so you can import it, have some sample working data that you can use to kind of interact with these deployed models in your environment. The goal to simulate these types of referential integrity issues and visualize the golden records. We're going to look at a lot of different dimensions of the data, some of the design options. And all of this is tied to a community article where I'm also sharing more lessons learned. In no way is it comprehensive, but hopefully it will spark more conversation. I'd love to hear your feedback. So let's jump into the walkthrough. Okay, so jumping into Master Data Hub, I'm looking at the models view. I have some pre-built models here that I'll walk through the simple configuration of. Always a good best practice to think of the models that you're going to need to reference. And in this case, let's first look at a relationship where a product can reference many components, a one-to-many relationship. So if we're looking at kind of the sub-records or child records first, you can walk through the component level model configuration. Very simple setup here, or setup a name and root element of component for the model name, and the fields include the component name and the component code, both text fields. No data quality steps are being set up in this case. In order to effectively publish a model, it does require at least one match rule specified. So I've simply set it up as the component name. Record title format. We'll learn more about this as we walk through the scenarios. But I'm leveraging the component name and the component code to set up a working title for the record. Very helpful in visualizing that golden record in the data stewardship console. And it's to make the display kind of similar. I'll be jumping back and forth here a bit, but make it look similar to the scenario that we've set up here, where it's the component name and then in parentheses the component code, all of which are tied to a system key. This is the source entity ID for a particular system. And that's what's expected for every source that's interacting with the golden record. So whenever you see the field ID here, you can even hover over it. It's to communicate the source entity ID of that record. So important to note that. No, I'm not setting up any tags as part of this model either. It's just a straight component. So save that either as a draft or publish that out. This model has been pre-deployed, for this particular case. I've set it up to be deployed to a dev repository, and it's linked to sources called System A and System B. So that component needs to be referenced within the product for this particular scenario. If I open up the product model, very simply named product, and the fields within it include the product name and the product code. But I've also set up a repeatable field group. Think of it as an array. Boomi, we refer to it as a collection, which includes this list of items that reference all of the components that should be a part of that product. So thinking back to this scenario, you could have wireless headphones, this product kind of master level, and then in the subrecord of component, it could reference a left ear pad and a right ear pad, which each have their own component record instances. And I want to be able to reference that list and have that available as part of my product. So this requires configuring a field group, very basic field group, but the repeat options are set up to allow it to repeat. And a good best practice is that the collection name, that's kind of like the overarching name of that list, I like to make it the plural form of the thing that you're looking to master. So I'm saying product components here, but the base field group itself is the singular form of product component. And then you can identify how you would want items to be absorted into that collection, meaning they're either created or updated based on a matching key. A lot of nuances to this. Some of the lessons learned are in the article, but I'm saying for every unique component reference, maybe there's other, I want that to be used to identify what the component is as a part of this collection, but I want it to use it to drive the creator update. Maybe I want to append new component items to that list. So it's important to set a collection key here in this case. If that component reference already exists, maybe the quantity changes. In this case, I have one left ear pad and one right ear pad. Maybe I want to change those numbers in the quantity. Using a key can help to drive those changes. if you're not using keys, in a lot of scenarios, it will simply overwrite everything that's within that list. And we'll walk through what that looks like from an integration perspective in just a bit. So if cancel out of here, this particular case is deployed and is expecting updates from system A. So let's begin to build that and visualize what this would look like in Master Data Hub. So I'm leveraging the integration service as a means to upload the data. So if we jump over to integration, this is the example process that will be shared and linked to in the community article. But it simulates a number of kind of working data scenarios where it's always best to publish and deploy the reference models as you can. So component being the child in this particular kind of onboarding scenario. I'm going to look to contribute those components to Hub first. Create a very simple process with some data that can be adjusted if you wanted to kind of play around with what it would look like within Hub. But always important to identify an ID. Remember, that's the source entity ID for system A. So these are all like A system IDs. They all start with the letter A, just as a simple identifier for that record. Then there's the component name and the component code. So I have three simple cases here that I'll look to upsert into Hub. I've created a local atom for testing in my account. So I'm just saying, run this data, generate this simple flat file, and translate it into a request up to Hub for this system A. So that completed relatively quickly. With this model being deployed, I can jump over to stewardship, and I want to look at the component golden record, and you can see it has leveraged that title format that I had set, where it's the component name and then in parentheses the component code. So I visualize quite nicely, learn more how that's really helpful in unit testing in just a bit, but you can see it's accurately representing these field values. So now my data that I'm going to reference exists now within Hub. So now I can build kind of the product upsert into Hub that includes a list. So if we look back at this scenario, really what I'm saying is now I want to create the wireless headphone product, but have it reference one-to-many components. So I have in Hub the left ear pad and the right ear pad. If we jump over to the integration, I look to connect to this kind of product example here. You can see that I'm looking to create product A001. That's the entity, source entity ID for source A. Here's its name, here's its code. I want to upsert into that collection the left ear pad, the right ear pad, and the reference to that component. If I look back at the model for product, there is a reference field that I've set up in my collection. And it's simply referring to the model component. No integrity rules. We'll look at that kind of a next lesson here. But it's important that if there's a reference field, it's important to specify the source entity ID of the model you're referencing. So I'm saying I need to pull in the golden record that exists for my component, the left ear pad, but refer to that source entity ID in system A. So the expectation here is that if I go back to stewardship, for system A, you can see that the left ear pad, the base data just includes the name and the code, but for the sources that have an established link, I need to use that source's entity ID, AF523. And that would be the expectation that if I'm referencing that record and sending in data on behalf of system A, that should be in the reference field. So the same would apply for the right ear pad as well, and using that source entity ID for the reference. So I have kind of that repeating list. Both are upserting into the collection. And if I choose to test this out, upserts the product, creates that XML, and if it entered in successfully, we should be able to see that under the product. So the wireless headphones, product code ZZ4T. If I expand the product components collection, you can see now there's an instance per product component. So this is why it's handy to think about the plural and the singular form when you're designing the model, just to better visualize the data. It's including kind of the basic text for the component name or the reference. I've included both field types here just to show how it could be done. You don't necessarily need to use a reference in this case, but if maybe there are other fields in that component model that need to be synchronized with other systems, and you want to be able to link and refer to the full context of that component, sort of maintaining this relationship could be quite helpful. And when you're synchronizing the data out on different channels, the expectation will be that for anything that's going out on system A, in that reference field, this would be the expected value. And that ensures that the data that it's linking to in system A is using the right key. It's not causing any type of referential integrity errors. So that's why this gear icon is rather important to see. Well, it's referencing this golden record, but what's its relationship to this system, and what's its expected entity ID, and is it resolved? If it's unresolved, or it says pending here, it means that that referred to record doesn't have a link to that system, and that can cause some integration issues. So you can see here that the product is now reflecting that one-to-many relationship. Okay, so let's look at it from the opposite direction, where if I'm thinking in product, this is a very top-down approach where all the components are included within the product. But what if my case calls for the component should be able to reference to its parent product? Maybe that's a better way to manage that data relationship depending on how the systems need to synchronize. I'm going to walk through the setup and deployment of that particular scenario and how you can adjust the integration to be able to support where a component needs to reference up to that parent product. So if we go back to models, we'll look to edit the component model and add a new field. We'll just call this parent product. I'll set this as a type of reference, and I'm in the component, and it should refer to model product. There are reference integrity options. First, I'll just set up both here for the sake of testing, kind of see how it reacts to different scenarios. No repeatability options. We're assuming in this case that a component can only reference one parent. So I'm going to save that. I'm just going to add that for now and publish it to say added parent product reference. Take me back to the model screen. And now I can choose to deploy that new model version to my development repository. We'll see that it is now set up as version 5 and is fully deployed. Now I need to reflect that in my integrations. So we're just working with System A at the moment, but we now need to append parent product data to what's going in. So I'll just look to add that field at the end of my kind of flat file format here. If we look back at this example, remember the reference should always be to that source entity ID. So for my left and right ear pad should refer to A001. For this portable speaker example, it should go to A002. So that's the key that I would want to identify here. And then, yeah, for the power supply, I want that to go to A002. So I'm good with that. Just want to adjust my mapping to reflect that I have a fourth field here. I'll just call it parent product. Where does that go? Well, notice my current kind of working version of the component model in Hub hasn't imported the new field that I've deployed. So it's important that I save this out. We go into the operation for System A and re-import. So I can click the import button, choose my development repository connection, insert the source ID. In this case, it's A system. That will browse and find the available models. It's the current component I'm working with. And that will refresh the XML profile in integration. And just to sanity check this, you can see that it includes the parent product reference field that I've just added to the model. Close this out, save and close this. And if I reopen the component to hub mapping, we'll just add that in. So now if we choose to retest this and save the changes, see what happens. So if we look at the data that went into Hub, there's 3 component updates. It's including that parent product entity ID. So if we jump over to Hub and look at the golden record 4 component, you can see here that only 2 were updated. And also this golden record ID here is linking to that parent product, which can get rather confusing as this is really just a Boomi created GUID for that relationship. If we look at the field data itself, pretty much the same as what's in the main table view here. It just links out to that parent product. The third one, the power supply, isn't effectively referencing that parent. If we look at quarantine, we'll see that there is an unknown reference value quarantine item, which says A002 does not resolve to a golden record. And that makes sense in this case. We set up within the model for component enforce incoming reference integrity, which means that if it's checked, incoming field values that do not reference a valid golden record will be quarantined. We never created this portable speaker product within Hub. You could create that sample. When you do, it will, you could reprocess that data in and it will effectively resolve. So Hub is doing its job here and notifying that, yeah, there's not a correct relationship here. You're submitting something that doesn't yet exist. Now, depending on how the data is processed into Hub, that may cause a lot of errors, and maybe you don't need to get notified or have the data be quarantined for these updates if there isn't a parent reference just yet. But maybe you would want to prevent invalid data from being delivered to downstream systems such as System B. In this case, we could uncheck enforce incoming, and then for enforce outgoing, what we'll do here is we'll just hold onto any of the golden record deliveries that don't have a link to the parent golden record. But when it does, we'll allow it to be fetchable from Hub. So it's basically these integrity options are trying to solve the same goal here, but there could be the enforce incoming is a bit more stringent in that it will quarantine that issue. So what I'll do here is I'll uncheck enforce incoming, we'll reprocess the data. I'm also going to add a record title format in the product model. So first, let's publish the component, saying, remove inbound ref integrity rule. I may not have correctly changed that, so let's, yeah, I think I just canceled. Just remove that and click save, publish that. Now my next version can be deployed. I'll also look to go into product and set up a record title format. Remember, the golden record ID was in that relationship, but if I wanted it to include the product code, a space, and then the product name, I can create a golden record title based off of that. So I'll look to publish this version as well. And then I'll look to deploy each of the model instances. Now we can reprocess the data that was in quarantine. So removing that inbound referential integrity setting, once this visualizes here, we can choose to resubmit it, saying unknown reference value. Parent product does not resolve to a golden record. I've removed that concerns, so let's resubmit it. It's removed from quarantine. If we look at the golden record, see, yeah, it still doesn't link out because I haven't created that second product. But if we look at this power supply component, you'll say, oh, it's unresolved, which means something was entered by one of the sources. And you can click on the gear icon and it'll say, yes, A002 was entered in this case, but it's still pending. It doesn't have an established link to the product golden record for system A. So that will, in essence, hold any updates for that power supply out to system B. You'll also notice under the golden records view that instead of the golden record ID displaying, since we set up the record title format in the product model and deployed that, it automatically refreshes all of those referenced golden records to use that naming convention. Very helpful when testing instead of seeing that GUID. And it's visible in the main table view and also in kind of the detail view of that golden record. And you can see that it has that effective reference and has that same resolve state to the linked product. So that's how you can model kind of both dimensions for the one-to-many relationship. So I'd like to thank you for watching. Please refer to the integration example if you wanted to test different scenarios or fetch scenarios from Hub. So thanks a lot for watching.